How's it going, Akira? It's been too long since we first spoke. I mean, I think I initially reached out in January or something at this point, but
Yeah.
I'm really excited for you to be on the podcast today.
Thank you. I am so happy that we finally linked up. This has been a long time in the making for sure.
Yeah, it's been a crazy 6 months for me. It's
Yes.
cra-
Likewise.
yeah, crazy for you as well, I'm sure. So, Akira, I start everyone off with giving their background of how they got into IT, maybe what piqued their interest, what made them, potentially even think that they could go down this path, right? Because I have a lot of my audience that are new to IT, they're new to security, and maybe they're wondering, can I make this career change? Will this actually work out for me? So, what's your story?
That is such a good question. And I love that your audience is maybe on the newer side of their journey. So, to start out with, I want to say, yes, you absolutely have a place in this industry. Keep going, keep grinding, do what you got to do. It's not an enjoyable time trying to break into it. It's really hard. I know I went through lots of trials and tribulations and nights of crying and all that good emotional stuff, but I'm here now and I'm really glad I didn't give up. So don't give up, keep going. There is definitely a place for you. So I will say this, I am a career changer. I did not start out in IT. That was not my MO at all. I was actually a Luddite. I hated computers. I did not believe in technology. I didn't own a computer. I didn't own a smartphone. I owned a flip phone and was very happy about it back when I was looking to change careers from my previous career to what I am in now. My previous job, which may explain a lot of why I was a Luddite, was working in classical music. I am a trained opera singer. I performed and taught opera for 10 years. And in there, I also did a very small stint in seminary school. So that is a world where technology is not necessarily frowned on, but it's very not a technologically advanced field, as it were. A lot of it is still acoustic instruments and you're singing with your voice without a microphone. You really don't have to think about these kinds of things at all. However, like I said, about 10 years into that career, I got really bored. And I was also extremely depressed. I was just really miserable. I was really unhappy, was in a really bad place mentally. And the career was just not cutting it for me. It was not leading to any kind of fulfillment. It was actually becoming a huge drag, on my psyche. And I knew I needed to make a change. So what I'll say to that is at the time, my former partner who worked in technology suggested that I look into programming. And I laughed at him. I was like, no way. That's crazy. I don't do computers. We don't do that here. And then he essentially just said Akira, it would answer a lot of questions for you. It would give you financial stability. Your brain would be engaged. You wouldn't be bored. If you can get over that you quote unquote don't like computers, you would actually probably really like it. So I found you a code school. They have free weekend classes. You need to go check out one of the weekend classes. You can borrow my computer. I'll drive you. Let's go. So I'm actually really grateful to this individual, even though we're no longer together. He was just so seminal in encouraging me to take this route. I did do the weekend little coding boot camp thing. And I fell in love with it. We had 2 days. One was a front-end engineering day. One was a back-end engineering day. The front-end engineering day, I was like, this is crazy. I don't understand. There's 3 things going on. Why am I coding in 3 languages at the same time? It was HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, of course. And then the back-end day, we were posting to Twitter via the Twitter API and Ruby. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I looked at the code and it made sense to me, kind of in A Beautiful Mind with John Nash, where he can kind of start to see the patterns and the numbers. I could actually sort of see what was going on here with the code and how things were working together. So because of that experience, I enrolled in code school. I went to a school called the Turing School of Software and Design. And yeah, my coding journey started there. Flash forward now to about 3 years later. I actually ended up leaving Turing because of, again, I was still just in a really bad mental place. I actually was diagnosed with a really severe mental illness later on. So I had to take some time off and like get better, as it were. Just take some time, get stabilized on medication and whatnot. I'm so grateful for Western medicine. I think, of course, it has its limits, but it has saved my life 100%. Like, it was a life-threatening mental health issue, and I am alive. So I will take it for what it is. So I left Turing. However, I did continue to pursue coding. I did continue to pursue the tech industry. I took some time off, like I said, to heal up. And then this is really funny. I joined the circus. So I joined
The literal circus?
The literal circus. I joined like a traveling trade show carnival troupe. And what I did there is I essentially sold trinkets at trade shows. Now, what the hell does this have to do with technology? Well, I'll tell you right now. When the pandemic hit, all the trade shows closed down, and the mom and pop group that I was working for that did all this work, they said, well, shoot, we need to transition our business to online, otherwise we're not going to sell anything. And my boss looked at me and said, hey, Akira, like, you do stuff with computers, right? Like, you went to code school. I was like, yeah, I mean, I didn't finish, but I really want to do it. And he's like, can you build all our online stores? And I said, well, hell yeah, I'll totally build all our e-commerce stores. So I built all of our e-commerce stores.
Wow.
I had no idea what the H I was doing. Like, it was very much trial by fire. I look back at my work now and I'm like, oh, I mean, that looks okay. Like, it looks okay. It works. It's functional. It's not the most like beautiful thing I've ever done in my life, but it worked, right? And that's what really got me in the door. So from there, I took essentially every and any technology job I could find that was interesting to me, that also like played on my skill set. So I've worked in e-commerce as a web developer. I've worked as a software engineer for EdTech. I've also worked as a teacher in EdTech. Like, I created a coding bootcamp for full stack JavaScript. So it was interesting. I was like learning full stack JS as I was teaching it to other people. I've worked in developer relations for cybersecurity companies because I have that heavy performing and teaching background from teaching music and performing in opera. And of course, marrying that with technical skills has worked really well. But I always wanted to just go on the engineering side of things. So my current position, now we're fast forwarding all the way to now, is as an application security engineer, so straight engineering, with a company called Resilia, which is a for-profit company that empowers and scales nonprofits. What I'll say to that is that I was able to get this position because I worked really hard, like, at doing extra things at every single job I did to learn the engineering side of things. And I found my kind of like trick is if I can teach someone else something, then I will learn it. So my entire career until now, I've been teaching other people about technology and learning the technology as I'm doing it. So I've also like mentored people through code schools. I've mentored people through hackathons. Like, I've done a lot of teaching, and that is kind of like my personal brain hack of how to teach myself engineering skills. And so I just did that every single job I was at. I did a lot of volunteering as well. And it all sort of like kind of hit this tipping point where I was finally prepared to take on a full engineering role. And that's where I'm at now. Now, what I'll say again is to the people that are new, this took me since 2018. And I didn't become like a full-blown, like, quote unquote, like engineer until January of this year. So it took me 5 years from beginning of enrolling in code school to like full-blown security engineer. So that's why I keep saying, like, don't give up, because it can take some time, right? I took the scenic route for sure. Absolutely took the scenic route. Did a lot of tech adjacent roles. But if you want to be an engineer, like, just do whatever job you're doing as best as you possibly can do it. Let people know that you want to ultimately be an engineer. apply for those roles, interview for those roles, help other people reach their goals in engineering, and you'll learn a lot. And I think it will work for you. I mean, maybe it won't, but I'm pretty sure it will. So don't come after me if it doesn't. I'm sorry. But
Yeah. I think the most interesting part, maybe for me, that I didn't expect at all when I started this podcast was the extreme variety of backgrounds that I would be talking with, with everyone, right? That everyone has. It's, I mean, you're obviously the first one that came from the circus, the literal circus. You're obviously, the first opera singer I've ever had on. Probably the last. That is probably the last thing that I would ever guess for a security person to come from. It's extraordinarily interesting to me the wide range of backgrounds that we have in security.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about never giving up, right? And your journey was a little bit longer than mine, actually, probably double what mine was, because it took me about 2.5 years, and I even had IT experience just to break into security.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the important part. When I'm mentoring people and I'm talking to them about my journey into security, what it would take for them to get into security, and things like that, as I'm sure you do as well. I try to even talk them out of it, because if I could talk you out of it over just a conversation, with some coffee or whatever, you're probably not cut out for it, because this field is extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. It's extremely rewarding. You're always going to be learning. And if that isn't a fit for you, then it's just not a fit for you. Like, let's not try to fit a square into a triangle hole, right? Like, it's not going to work. Yeah. But if my active persuasion of trying to get you to not commit to it doesn't work, then this field is probably for you. Like, if me telling you, no, you're not for this thing, it's not going to work, which, by the way, I would never tell anyone that they're not for it, right? It would only be in an effort to persuade them or dissuade them from doing it. And if you come out of that and you say, hey, you know what, like, I'm still going to do this thing, it's like, all right, like, my efforts worked, actually. Let's do this. Let's go down this road. Do you also approach it, from that same mentality, from that same kind of effort, right? Because of the difficult path that you went down. Do you also approach it that same way, or do you approach it differently?
That's a good question. I was given that treatment actually in opera. So in opera, like, there's a very pervasive sense of, like, if you can do anything else, do it. Because opera is so freaking hard. Like, you're on the road all the time. Like, you're hardly ever with your friends and family. You have to live the life of a nun or a monk. Like, you can't party, you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't have tattoos, you can't have dreadlock, so I'm definitely in my rebellion phase right now. When someone comes to me and says, I want to do security, I don't necessarily give them, like, too much tough love, because that was given to me in opera, and, like, it definitely motivated me, but it only pushed me so far. And once I actually, like, did the thing, I was like, hey, I did it. Like, now what? Like, I kind of lost a little bit of my joy for it, like, through that sort of messaging. Not to say that that's the same for everybody, but that's just kind of what happened to me. What I will say is, are you prepared for a long, arduous road? Like, so it's kind of the same message, but a little bit more, not like I try to talk someone out of it, but I do try to give them the facts that, like, the industry right now is not necessarily the most accepting to newcomers. It's really difficult to get your first job in cyber. At least from my experience and from a lot of anecdotal experience of other people too. I've never seen anyone just, like, get a job in it outside of, maybe they go to college for it or whatever. I've never seen that. So I guess I just have to say, like, do you have grit? Like, do you have the ability to persevere when things are really, really difficult? And are you lit up by solving really hard problems and learning all the time. So I guess, Joe, it is kind of similar to what you're saying. I just give it to them in like a slightly different messaging medium.
Yeah, I would say it's very similar. You know, like for me, right? Like I do it in just that first conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
You pass the first conversation, it's like, all right, let's get to business. You know, let's get to work. You know, I'm not spending 8 weeks trying to convince someone not to do it. Like that's a waste of my time at that point.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. They're like, okay, dude, I'm still here. Like you can stop trying to convince me.
Right. That would never work.
Right.
But you know, it's interesting, right? Because it's so extremely difficult, you know, to get in, to learn the skills, to get the experience. And I feel like a lot of times, you know, nowadays, right, people kind of want that overnight success almost. They think that even potentially going through a boot camp or getting a degree in it, you know, earns you the right at that position, at that role in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, maybe it earns you the role at a very low level analyst position at the right company that's willing to teach you IT, that's willing to work with you on your soft skills.
Yeah.
But the majority of companies don't have that mentality. I mean, like 99% of the companies do not have that mentality. You know, you're going into security and you're kind of, you know, you're kind of going to war. You've been to war before. You already know what it's like to earn the respect of someone else in the room that, you know, doesn't know you, has less technical knowledge or capabilities than you, and you're able to make friends rather than continue, you know, potentially a 10-year disagreement between your org and this other organization that you just started at. You don't even know that exists, right? But you're breaking down barriers. It is challenging, and I always tell people, you know, to start in help desk first, because help desk, you know, you're going to get all of the issues. More importantly, you're going to be working through all those soft skills that you learn, you know, because like for myself, I started with help desk right out of college. And, you know, I can't even tell you the amount of times, even just in one day, where I'd pick up the phone and the other person on the other line is already pissed off at me. They're already having a bad day. I mean, like they've been struggling with my product for hours and they decided to just call me now. You know, even like it's 4 p.m., like I'm about to leave in 30 minutes and it's like, oh my God, like now I'm going to be here. You know?
Surprise.
Yeah. You know, and I may have just gone through a difficult day. You know, I may have just gone through back-to-back calls of, you know, nothing but unhappy people. And, you know, now I have to grow through that, right? I have to learn how to handle that, how to not give up, how to keep going, when to hand it off, when to escalate it. Those things are expected in security, right? Is that also your mentality with it or your experience with it?
Yeah, I mean, wow. Honestly, the biggest surprise in working in my current role, which I'm so glad that I've prepared for and I have so much more room to grow with, is the soft skills. Like just the communication, influence, like influencing people to do what you're asking them to do, is no joke. Like it is no joke. Knowing how to do the political game of like, who do I talk to talk to this other person, to talk to this other person, to make sure this thing gets done. It's not necessarily like Game of Thrones politics. Like no one is like playing the Game of Thrones and you live or you die. It's just security training, right? But it can feel like that a little bit though, right? Like how do I do what I need to do so that other people are motivated to do what they need to do so that we're all secure here? And that is not easy. What I'll say is that my biggest boon in that area has been my teaching experience, because a lot of teaching involves motivating other people to do things that they may not necessarily want to do, but that are going to get them to a better place, right? So for example, one mistake I made was like, I just like gave security training to the engineers in my company. I was like, hey, do this training. And they were like, cool. What's in it for me? Like, why do I have to do this? Like, forget you, lady. And now I'm learning like how to like essentially frame this truthfully, because this is the truth, that this will help them in their career. It will help them in their getting promotions, getting raises, becoming more respected by their peers. But I can't just give them a security training and expect them to like fill in all those amazing gaps. I know that, but they don't know that. And if I tell them that, it means one thing. But if I can get their engineering managers to tell them that, that is an entirely different ballgame. And if I can get the lead engineer, the head of engineering to tell the engineering managers to tell them that, that's even better. So the more I can stack this in a way that is like, look, this is beneficial not just for our company or our organization in being more secure, we have better CIS scores, woohoo, cool. But we're positioned better in the market, where we're more attractive to customers, and it's better for the engineers themselves to have these skills. And that is something that I did not realize was going to have to be done with so much finesse, right? And I'm learning a lot. Like, that is a big area of like, oh, I can't just like plop something on someone's desk and expect them to be excited to do it. Because like, if someone did that to me, like, I would be like, I don't care, like, cool, thanks for this extra work. And B, I can't expect people to just intrinsically know why this benefits them. I have to tell them.
Yeah, that is, you bring up a really good point of not being able to just, hand something over, plop it on their desk, so to speak, and expect them to get it done and be okay with it, right? It reminds me of a time when I worked for a credit bureau, and the security team that I was on had a very bad relationship, like extremely bad, with the database admin team or database engineering team.
Mm-hmm.
And I set it out as my personal mission, because I was the lead on this team, to, kind of mend some broken pathways there.
Yeah.
And, I spent probably a month, maybe 2 months of taking their team out to lunch, buying them drinks, stopping by their desk daily, seeing how they're doing, maybe not daily, weekly, definitely, seeing how they're doing before I ever asked them to do anything, right? When I asked them to do something, it wasn't a get it done immediately. I kind of need this, maybe within a couple days, right? And it just got plopped on my desk, and so I need your expertise, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because a couple months down the line, me and my team, we were performing an upgrade, and we ran into an issue that was very specific to the database. It was something that, none of us would have known how to resolve, right? To them, it's a 30-second issue. They know exactly how to do it. Like, this is just normal, everyday things for them. For me, it's not. And whenever we're talking about a database, I get nervous because I've dropped too many databases in my lifetime, and I know what that's like.
Yeah.
And someone from my team had called them basically into our conference call and was trying to get them to help, and they were very standoffish, very against it and whatnot. And I was just busy at the time, right? But when I heard that they were, being very difficult to work with, I chimed in and I said, hey, this is Joe. We need your help. We called you because we don't have this expertise. We don't know what we're doing. And we just simply, need your help. And the whole conversation changed as soon as I chimed in. As soon as I was present, they knew I was there. They knew that I had exhausted all of my resources, that like I wasn't even Googling the right things, right? Like it was at that level, know? And they were much more willing to help me once I put in that work, though, of the previous months of stopping by again to know these guys, taking them out to lunch, learning what their favorite beer is, right? Yeah. Buying them a 6-pack of it over the weekend and, bringing it to them on Monday, like that sort of stuff, right? And this is all coming out of my own pocket. Like, I'm not using it on a company card or anything like that. Like, I'm putting in genuine work here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the more you can build those relationships, the better. I'm so glad that you just told that anecdote, because that, like, I feel like that's above and beyond. Like, I haven't even thought about like, oh, like what's someone's favorite XYZ thing? Like maybe we can like get it for them or whatever. I love that. It's almost like, what I'll say is this: when working with internal stakeholders, to be like corporate about it, internal stakeholders, um, a good way to think of it is that you are doing customer service. It's just that the internal stakeholders are your customers, right? Um, and when you do white glove customer service, that's when really magical things start to happen. And then I think this, for me personally, the second I start to think of my internal colleagues or internal stakeholders as not customers, but just like coworkers where we all like have to do this thing, is when it loses a lot of the magic, right? It loses a lot of the spark. One thing that I found, this is actually a cool lesson my father taught me. My dad worked in oil and gas, and then he worked in insurance sales for like a really long time, and he did really well for himself. And one thing he always did for people is he said, do the extra work that's like the paperwork for them so they don't have to do it. And that will go a long way. So for example, like when I gave out my secure coding training recently to the engineering managers, I like made them all tracking sheets. I was like, hey, like, you know, I looked into if we can do this through a particular piece of software we have to track who's doing it. We can't. So here's like a sheet I just made it for you. It's like, did this person do it? Yes or no? The end. And they were like, wow, this is really great. Now I don't have to go make this sheet and like figure out a way to track this. And it's like off their mind. If you can do little stuff like that, I guess that's my equivalent of like buying someone a 6-pack of beer is like, please let me help you make your job a little bit easier. And yeah, like the more personable you can be, the better. The best person I have ever seen in the security space, the best person, I'm going to give her a major shout out. Her name is Tanya Janka. She was my former boss at Bright Security. Her people skills are ridiculously good. They are exceptional. She is so good with people and she's so effective at her job. And I think part of like, I mean, she just, that's her special trick, right? She's just so dang good with people and people want to do the thing for Tanya. They want to do it for her because she's so fucking great. Pardon my French. It's true. And I that was really inspiring to me too. Like just to see her like, just how good she is with people. And I mean, that's all this is. It's just, we're just engineers in the people business, right? Like that's all this boils down to.
Yeah, I think that's actually really important what you said, you know, offering like a white glove treatment, because I think a lot of times when you're an internal employee just dealing with internal customers, right? Mm-hmm. You think of white glove treatment typically with like a CEO, CIO, you know, the executive suite.
Yeah.
Rarely do you start thinking about white glove treatment with internal stakeholders that, you know, assist you to keep your product running.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of the important distinction to make, right? Security is very different, where security people, they typically know exactly what's going on with their system at any one point in time. They're very good at understanding, let's just say, you know, Windows Server 2016, understanding the ins and outs, what a DLL should be doing, what it shouldn't be doing, things like that. They'll probably even know how to deploy a database, how to set up the database, you know, maybe even read the database logs, right? Mm-hmm. It's a totally different ballgame when we start looking at database logs, determining what is wrong, and then figuring out the command on the database that resolves it without destroying the database. That's a very different skill that takes database engineers years of experience to develop. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's important for us to understand where our limitations are and making those relationships, right, where we need them to be. You know, like I had to make a relationship with the database team. Thankfully, it paid off, you know, but I've had to make relationships with systems teams, infrastructure teams, networking teams, because, you know, maybe I'm doing a different project, you know, like currently at my current workplace, I'm doing a cloud WAF deployment, right? I've never done a cloud WAF before. I've deployed other technologies that are similar to it. I assume it'll be, you know, roughly the same difficulty level as a proxy and whatnot, right? But I still need the networking team input. I need their help because I don't know, you know, are we doing, I don't know, BGP or some other protocol between this endpoint and that endpoint? Do we need to intercept it a different way? I mean, there's a million things that I don't know. right? And I'm not a network security person to save my life, right? Like we can start talking about, encryption and stuff, but like that's kind of where it cuts off. And so
Yes.
it's important to identify who, not in a disingenuous way, but who you need to befriend and who you need to kind of give that enhanced treatment to early on for you to be successful in the role.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I know if I ever go to a different company and do the same kind of job again, that'll be my first priority. Like, now that I know that, right? Like, and I guess that's something else that I would say to all of our listeners is like, if you are also like wondering, like, how do I get into this career? What's a good skill to develop? Like, I know how to hack everything. I know everything about SQL injection. Like, why don't I have a job? Maybe practicing that kind of like white glove treatment with maybe the people you're interviewing with. Like, one thing that is really good to do is like go look at their LinkedIn and like learn about them and be like, hey, like, I saw you volunteer at such and such, blah, blah, blah. Like, my uncle volunteers at whatever it is, right? Like, find commonalities, like learn how to make friends and build those relationships with people in your in your network that already exists. And then you can take those skills into your new job. And that's definitely something that I am really looking forward to, like, doing again, getting better at. And you're so right, Joe. Like, when I first started, I was like, oh my God, I need to know everything. Like, how am I possibly going to do this job? Like, I'm going to need to be like a programming wizard and like a network engineer wizard and like know everything about every single help desk ticket ever. Like, I was like, there's no freaking way. Like, I don't know that I can do this job. And like you just pointed to, what I realized quickly is my job is not to do everyone else's job. My job is to empower people to do their job in a secure manner. That's it. That's all my job is to do. And I need to know about the security. I need to read the security books. I need to do the security courses. I need to futz with the DAS tool that's giving me a headache and having me tear my hair out. And that's my job, right? I need to go through the particular pain points that I go through and let other people do their job too, not try to overstep my bounds. At the end of the day, the big theme is stay in my lane, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point, and to kind of, I guess, shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
Maybe some of the most difficult people that I have encountered to get to do something, really anything, is developers. And it wasn't until a recent role where we actually had an AppSec team that handled all of that stuff that I saw what success was like from that perspective. The reason why they were so successful is because this is a team of all like previous developers. They all knew how to develop an application, how to write code, inside and out. They spoke more coding languages fluently than they spoke English even. I mean, like, and you know what I'm saying? Like, their skill level was extremely high with coding in ways that I'll never achieve.
Right.
And so there was a skill gap / like communication gap that I had with developers that I just couldn't fill, because I didn't know. Like, if you put some Python in front of me and said it did this, I couldn't really challenge you on it. I mean, I couldn't say yes or no. It'd be like, okay, yeah, that's what it does,
Yeah.
These guys were able to, step into the situation and not only describe the code of exactly what they wanted, the developer to write, but they were able to properly explain the security implications of doing it that way.
Yeah.
And having that bridge is, it's absolutely required, especially nowadays, right? Because we're not only developing more things faster than we ever have before, but we're putting them up into the cloud. And in the cloud, you're typically separating everything out, right? Which is a totally different way of developing something on-prem, a legacy way that, was normal when you and I started in IT, right? Of developing it all in one stack on one server. Maybe you have a database server that's separate, but it's all together, right? In the cloud, it's all separate and it's completely different. And so it's so extremely important, if you're going to go down the AppSec route, to honestly, in my opinion, be a developer first.
Right.
Is that what you've run into as well? In terms of your developer skill set, really paying dividends in terms of how you engage with other developers, how you get them to do things that, they would normally push back on a lot. Are you able to answer questions more effectively? I guess I'm asking too many questions right now all at once, right? Because I'm kind of fascinated though, these guys, that I encountered, they were the smartest people I've ever met in security. And that's really saying something.
Right. Yeah. No, security's full of really smart people. That is so interesting. And I want our listeners to understand that this is a matter of opinion. If you do not fall into a particular background, it does not mean you're doomed and you can't do this job. Like Joe said earlier, people come to this job from all kinds of backgrounds, right? I have not had a ton of development experience. A lot of my experience has been in more like teaching, so teaching tools and things like that. I can read code really well. I can write code okay. I would not say that my sweet spot is in writing applications. I can code. I can write software. And my personal genius is being able to explain why something matters in a security mindset. So for example, you were talking about your developers, they could refactor a piece of code. Let's say they could be you should try it this way and it'll run it, X times better with, X memory, it'll just be better. It'll be more performant. It'll be, easier to read, whatever it is. Right. So I can do that, but what I can really do is explain why this matters for security. For example, well, if we refactor this code, then we're going to have less of what's called an attack surface. And an attack surface is blah, 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 blah. And then I will explain these security concepts so that people can then be oh, not only am I getting rid of technical debt or I'm refactoring whatever, because it just will make my code more performant. It'll make my code more easy to read. It'll, lead to some resiliency in the code base. But also there's now this security thing called attack surface that I can also now be mindful of, and I'll be able to explain what that means to them really, really well. So like I said, I've learned that I need to stay in my lane. I can't come into a developer space and be oh, I know how to write this better than you. Because first off, I haven't been working in their code base for as long as they have. I can't write it better than them. I'm not a freaking wizard. I'm not a genius. I know there's coding geniuses out there, but I'm not one of them. But I can give them extra tools in their tool belt to make sure that what they are doing is being done in a secure manner. So that's kind of my zone of genius, as it were. So I definitely want to say, does it help to be an amazing developer? Hell yeah. I wish I was a better developer a lot. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly taking classes. I'm constantly trying to write my own stuff. With varying degrees of success, one thing I want to do as well is start contributing to open source so that I can have a little bit more of a regular practice. And it's also more important, at least for me in my viewpoint, to learn about the security implications of things like secure code review, things like DAS tools, things like SAS tools, things oh gosh, what else? Doing audits of all of our particular pieces of software that we're using. How can we do third-party integrations in a secure manner? There's so much more aside from just writing code that goes into AppSec that I was completely unaware of before I started doing this job, right? And the things that differentiate me are those particular things, right? It's not oh, I'm going to be a better coder than you are. It's, oh, I'm going to have a more security-oriented mindset than you are that I can teach you so that you can be a better coder. And what I'll say again to all our listeners is everyone's different. That may not be your approach. That might not be your zone of genius. Maybe your zone of genius is you are an extremely proficient coder and you can do you just know about security headers and you always do the right thing with input validation. And that's just in your second nature. and that's like what you can do. But maybe you're coming to it much from like a programmer mindset first and a security mindset second. I come to it from a security mindset first and a programmer mindset second. Have I had success? Yeah. Do I know any different? Could I be more successful if I was another way? Maybe, but I don't know. I'm only me, and that's my limited viewpoint of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point of knowing your skill set, knowing your strengths, and then, really learning how to lean on other resources to make up the difference, right? And I think that is something, as new people are coming into the field, they have to, kind of learn and understand that, you're not going to be an expert, in developing an application in Golang than, a developer, right? Like, you don't need to be that. You need to understand the code. You need to understand what you're looking at. You can maybe even write some, right? But you're not supposed to be the expert in that. You're supposed to be the expert in how to secure whatever that is in that code, and it's an important distinction, because I think as security professionals, we're a little bit more curious than other people. We're a little bit more even self-conscious in ways, right? Of knowledge, of skill set, of imposter syndrome, right? And it's important to know where those boundaries are, for yourself and even for your team when you become more senior and directing them through this process as well. Have you encountered very much imposter syndrome? And I ask because your background is an opera singer, right? So I would imagine, me personally, I would definitely be struggling with imposter syndrome on a daily basis. If I was an opera singer, which I do not have the voice for, I don't have the skill set for. My wife is a violinist, and like, she's the talented one in the family,
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Imposter syndrome. There is a lot to say about that. Wow. And we only have like 10 minutes.
Should we have a part 2 for imposter syndrome?
I have thoughts, man. I have some serious thoughts. I'm going to say it this way. Imposter syndrome is twofold. Fold number 1, true imposter syndrome. Actually, it's threefold. Sorry. Threefold. Whoa. True imposter syndrome, which is a feeling of deficiency or not being good enough, or feeling lesser than. I think that is a psychological thing that is part of the human condition. I think everybody has it in some area in their life. And if they say they don't, they're lying to you. And if it shows up in your professional life, that's just where it shows up. And that's what we call imposter syndrome. Do I deal with that? Yes. Do I do things to mitigate that? Absolutely yes. I seek help dealing with that through many different channels and avenues. Otherwise, it will completely cripple me, and it's not good. So if you're feeling genuinely I'm lesser than, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, honestly, the best thing I can say to counteract that is talk to a mental health professional, talk to a trusted friend, take psilocybin mushrooms and have an experience about it. Do what you need to do to really take care of yourself and realize that you are in fact worthy and have inherent value. That is very important, not only for a job, but for just a good quality of life. Right. The second thing I'll say of the trifecta is genuine imposter. Maybe you just don't have the skills, right? Maybe you're in a job and the skills required of you just don't have. I love that section of imposter syndrome because that's easy. You just go get the skills. You just go get the training. For example, at one of my jobs, I was a developer relations for a company called FusionAuth. Man, that job was way over my skill set. Whoa, holy moly, I was not up to par for that job. And I had to teach the shit out of myself how to do a lot of that job. And I learned a lot. Holy crap, I learned a lot. And so if your internal clock or your internal compass is hey, you may not really be up to this task because you have a big skills gap. Listen to that and close the skills gap. It's okay. It's okay to not know. That's why you're in this job. I think in tech, everybody also has imposter syndrome because there's a huge skill gap. There's always something new that you need to be learning and applying just as soon as you learn it in order to do your job. So I think that's also why we talk about imposter syndrome a lot in tech, is because, yeah, like true to fact, we're all kind of imposters because we just don't know what we need to know ever, right? And then we know it, and then the next problem comes, and that's why we get paid the big bucks, is because we're solving problems that no one has ever solved before. So yeah, that's going to lead to some psychological, like, oh shit, like maybe I don't know what I need to know. The problem then is when that goes into the psychological side of like, I'm not good enough. It doesn't mean you're not good enough. It doesn't mean you're less worthy. It just means you don't know the thing, and you can go learn the thing because that's in your capability to do. If you were in this field, you have that capability. It's proven. You can do it. You can do it. I promise you can do it. The third section of imposter syndrome is living inside of a flawed system that is genuinely not designed for you. This is especially true if you're a minority group in technology. If you're a woman, BIPOC, LGBTQ, maybe you have a disability, maybe you are neurodivergent. The world is not necessarily designed for that. And you can be operating in this world that is not designed for you. And that can lead to a lot of feelings of inferiority. And you have to realize, no, I'm just working inside of a flawed system. A lot of people did the very best they could to create this very flawed system. And a lot of people are doing not the best they can, and they're actually making it worse. And that's just a part of life, right? Like learning how to maneuver in a jacked up system and changing it where you can and accepting where you can't, like that whole serenity prayer, right? Like, God grant me the ability to change the things I can and accept the things I can't change. That is almost like a spiritual practice of work or a spiritual practice of life, right? It's like learning to accept that you may have these feelings because you're working in a system that is probably not designed for you. Even if you are one of the people it's designed for, everyone is different. Everyone has tough times in their life, and it's just, life is hard, right? So that's what I'll say. That's a three-pronged view of imposter syndrome. I could go very deep into all those three topics, but we don't have enough time.
Of course. You bring up, I think a lot of it has to do with mental health, as well as, like you said, identifying that the environment isn't necessarily, made for you. Mm-hmm. It's more about you figuring out how to potentially, be yourself and be successful in this environment. Like that's not an easy thing to do, for anyone.
Yeah.
And I've talked about it before on this podcast. I haven't talked about it too recently, I guess, but mental health is extremely important.
Yeah.
Like this past weekend, I went and did a float session at Float 60. It was fantastic. I have one of my personal goals for the year is to actually do it between 6 and 12 times. I'm a little bit behind, so I got to, rank it up, start going with that a little bit more. But, working out regularly, right? Yeah. Going for walks, getting away from your computer, kind of detaching.
Yeah.
All of those things, they help, and they kind of stack on each other over time, right? Like, so, you start feeling better and better. And, I guess the unfortunate side effect of that, right? At least for me, with my mentality, is like, it'll build up. It's like, oh, okay, I could stop for a while, right? And so I stopped for a while, and then I stopped for too long, and then these issues kind of like reemerge, and it's like, oh, wait, I need to go for walks again. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, I need to go work out. I haven't worked out in a while. Mm-hmm. For me, it's those hard. For me, it has to be like a really difficult workout, right? Like it has to be something that I'm starting to question, why am I still moving? That's when I get the most benefit from it, Mm-hmm. And as security professionals, it's easy for us to get caught up in a world of, you have to know everything.
Yeah.
You have to know everything. You have to be better. You have to be continuously growing and whatnot. And that'll wear on you for sure. And it's extremely important for you to be mindful of your mental health and, work on it. Right. And I think even a part of that is, like what you mentioned with the serenity prayer, right? Like, just understanding your sphere of control. What do you have direct control over? Yeah. What do you have no control over? and only focus on the things that you have control over, because it's not fair to yourself to be focused on things that you can't control. Because like, what are you supposed to do in that situation? For me, I'm very solution oriented, right? So like when my wife presents me with a problem, like, well, when I present you with a solution, don't be thrown off by it. Or, when I'm knocked down so many times, it's like, okay, you tell me how to solve this, because that's just how my mind is, right? I'm very solution oriented.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us in security are.
Yes.
So it's just, yeah.
That's why they pay us the big bucks. Or the million dollars. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, you bring up another good point. I have a friend that I made this friend early on in my security career, thankfully, and he told me that we earn our paycheck maybe at the very most 2 or 3 times a year. I mean, at the absolute most, right? And I said, well, what do you mean? Like, I go to work every single day. I'm working hard. He goes, no, you earn your paycheck because we're paid, way more than what other people in IT are typically.
Yeah.
You earn it when everything's going wrong. When your systems guy has no clue of what's going on with the server, when the networking guy has no clue of what's going on, when the database guy doesn't understand the logs that he is reading, you're the type of person that has to be able to come in and sort out the chaos, direct, the team, develop a plan of action, and move forward and resolve that issue, because your company is more than likely losing money every single minute that issue goes on. And so that's how we actually earn our paycheck. And that's very true. Like you earn it when everyone else is in disarray. there has to be some major issues going on, and hopefully that doesn't happen 3 times in a year, because people are probably losing their job if it happens 3 times in a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ayo.
Right.
Oh shoot. No, that's true, Joe. And like, one thing I'm really grateful for that I found cybersecurity in my career path is that was also my sweet spot when I worked in opera. Like, I was the person people would call if like a soprano got really sick at the last second and they needed someone to come and fill in like 2 hours, right? I was like literally known as like the last minute queen. Like, if people needed a sub like right effing now for really hard music on like Holy Week or something, when there's like thousands of people, whatever, right? Like, that was me. And I love that shit. Like, I love that experience. And like you also pointed to earlier, I think that mental health is really important, and you have to be consistently doing things that bolster your resilience. And this is a gross overgeneralization. I could be totally wrong, but I don't think I am. I think people that work in security love adrenaline. I think they are like adrenaline junkies, right? Like, there's something about security people that like, we just love that edge, right? We're like, yeah, like, I'm going to dye my hair purple and put it in dreadlocks and like F society. And I'm going to like learn how to hack, and I'm going to know all the things. And when shit goes down, I'm the one that's like, yeah, I can fix it. Like, we love that adrenaline rush, right? And if we aren't careful, that will overtake us, especially in my case. I'm not 20 years old anymore. Like, my body is like, you better take care of me or I'm not going to take care of you, because your lifestyle is a little extreme. Like, you're a little bit of an extreme person. So yeah, I think that you're right. We do earn our paycheck in that we can like essentially make sure the entire company doesn't implode, which is good. So like, a lot of people rely on us for their livelihood, right? They rely on us for the company's reputation, for the data, the whole CIA triangle, like this confidentiality, integrity, availability of customers' data. Like, these are big responsibilities. They are like, they can weigh heavy if you think too much about it. And if you don't take care of yourself, like, you gotta take care of yourself. Otherwise it's like, this will just get in your head, man. Like, I had my first existential crisis about working in security a few months ago, where I was like, oh my God, like, if I mess up my job, like, so many people are going to be affected in a non-trivial manner. And I talked to a friend of mine who's a CISO, And they were like, yep. Did you work out today? That was kind of their response. I was like, no, I'm going to go to the gym and pick up something really heavy and not think about it. But yeah, and it's good that we want to learn all the things, because we have to have that kind of drive. We have to be the kind of person that does have our tendrils and a little bit of everything, right? That has our mycelial network throughout the entire company. And we're constantly getting information and putting information out. And we have to be that type of a temperament. There is a temperament. I'm so glad I found cyber, because I'm yes, my people, my tribe. But yeah, if you don't take care of yourself, man, forget it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely. Well, Akira, we're at time, unfortunately. So I'll definitely just have to have you back on, and we'll talk more about, mental health and imposter syndrome and all that good stuff. But before I let you go, how about you tell my audience, where they can find you if they wanted to reach out to you? Maybe, the company, if there's a website. I know you're on the Security Weekly podcast now for Application Security Weekly. So if you just want to, say where they can find you, that would be great.
Yeah, so you can find me. A good way to get in touch with me is just to email me. You can find me at the Akirati, Akirati. It's like the Illuminati, but the Akirati, so anyway. So that's an email address I use just for correspondence with, people that hear me on podcasts, want to ask questions and whatnot. I'll do my best to reply. Sometimes I get swamped, and it's just you gotta just kind of catch me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is another good place to follow me. I like to write a lot of long form posts on cybersecurity and also just life and philosophy and music and stuff like that. And lastly, I do have a website. It's akirabrand.com. It is very in need of a revamp. So a lot of the information is kind of old, but every time I go on a podcast, I'm like, man, I really need to update my website. So check it out. By the time you're listening to this, I may have gotten around to it, which is very exciting. So yeah, and also, one last thing. You can find me on Application Security Weekly. I don't host every week, but I host about once or twice a month. And you can hear just my hot takes on all things cyber. I podcast with the gods, right? The people that I do the podcast with have been in the industry for a bazillion years, and they're so knowledgeable. So I'm the person that's hey, explain TLS, ha ha ha. So you can if you're a beginner, it's really good for you to listen to this podcast, because I'm also coming to it from beginner mind, right? So you'll get a lot out of it actually on the shows I'm on. You're going to hear a lot of beginner perspectives. So that will prove useful to you. So that's how you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Akira, for coming on. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope everyone enjoyed this episode.